Newsroom. Workers at one of the last Paris area car assembly plants had been braced for it. Still, though, it comes as a shock. Peugeot announcing the shutdown of its Aulnay-sous-Bois factory, part of 8,000 job cuts. Peugeot Citroën battered by its overdependence on a depressed European auto market. On Tuesday, rival French car maker Nissan Renault saw sales underperform by 3% for the first half of this year, a fall buffered by a boost in sales from the US, Japanese, and Chinese markets. The problems of France's auto industry say a lot about the state of Europe and the state of France, where domestic car sales are down more than 10% this year. Now you cross the Rhine, and it's a different story. Volkswagen, sales booming there, a boom mirrored by industry as a whole. France's newly elected socialist government has pledged to kickstart its fledgling industry. France, still the world's fifth or sixth largest economy on the planet, but not if its only assets become tourist attractions and luxury goods. Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the long road to recovery, and with us, Raquel Garrido of the Parti de Gauche, the left party. Thank you for being with us. Also with us, Stéphane Cosset, former senior economist for the IMF and who is with the centrist Modem party. Thank you for being with us. Mark Dean, journalist at Bloomberg News, welcome. And from Courtrai in Belgium, Barry van Gestel, former chair of Cadillac and Corvette in France. Welcome, sir. The France 24 debate, where you can always weigh in on the conversation on Facebook and Twitter. You can find us at François F24. A black day indeed for French industry, with that announcement at 8:30 this morning in the northern Parisian suburb of Aulnay-sous-Bois.
Thousands of job cuts at France's biggest car maker. Peugeot Citroën bosses say up to 8,000 people will either lose their jobs or be redeployed. Production at its Aulnay site near Paris will be stopped altogether. Union leaders believe it's nothing short of a catastrophe.
It's not only a terrible blow for the local and surrounding areas, we think it's a social tsunami, honestly. Because when you have a factory which employs 3,600 people, where everybody today earns their money, they'll be left with nothing. The whole area will be left with nothing.
Currently, Peugeot employs more than 30,000 people across France. But that'll change. Bosses say production at their Aulnay site will stop by 2014. Nearly half of workers there will lose their jobs, others will be reallocated. There's been a plant here at Aulnay for 40 years, but recently it's been in decline.
10, 20 years ago, there was work. There were 2 or 3 models of car. Today, we've only got one model and half the factory is empty.
In a tough couple of years for the whole car industry, the last 12 months for PSA has been particularly bleak. Profits have nosedived down more than a third. The car maker struggled with its target French and southern European markets, areas burdened with the debt crisis. Despite the job losses, Peugeot and the French government have denied that a state-funded rescue could be on the cards. Instead, Peugeot hope cost-cutting and restructuring will boost profit margins and save thousands of remaining jobs.
Before we talk about the specific problems at Peugeot, Mark Dean, losing your job is rough wherever you are on this planet. In France, though, today, all day long, we've heard on the all-news radio stations people saying how they've been at the factory for 20 years. In France, losing your job because the labor market is not the same as it is, for instance, in North America, it's particularly rough, it seems.
Well, it's psychologically rough. I mean, don't forget that in France there's very good unemployment benefit system, and there are hopefully opportunity. The question is how difficult it is going to be for people to find new jobs, and that's the really hard part. It's a big deal. Yeah.
The prospects for somebody who's worked for more than 20 years at that factory in Aulnay-sous-Bois, what are they?
Well, they're bad prospects, but
will they find work?
Before we start talking about what's going to happen after the layoffs, it's interesting to look at the plan and look at it and see whether it's legitimate or not. The question here is profits. Is it a profitable company? And it is. It earned 558 million euros last year. And the question is, why so many layoffs when the company is profitable? And the answer to that is the money that is paid for dividends to the financial shareholders. And so the question behind the whole Peugeot situation is the same one lying behind all of the industrial sector in France and indeed elsewhere, is inside of a company, who has the power, what is driving the production decisions, whether it's the financial sector or the productive sector. And I put inside of the productive sector the workers and the managers that have an industrial rationale, which is not the case of financial shareholders.
Stéphane Cosset, do you agree with Raquel Garrido that the closing of this factory is perhaps avoidable?
I don't think it is avoidable by itself, although I don't really know exactly all the details. But let's not be too gloomy. Look at, I think Toyota announced just a few days ago that they will expand their plants
in northern France.
In northern France. So maybe some of the workers working in Peugeot might be recruitable by Toyota very soon. So this is to show that, yes, indeed, we have some issues, but nothing has to be absolutely gloomy in that respect. What I think behind that is that, yes, Peugeot is losing money in France, while it might be profitable in other countries. Look at Renault. Renault is profitable outside France, and is selling more than half of its cars now outside France. So this is to show that this is mostly a French issue and not a problem of the company itself or the car industry itself.
Barry Van Gestel, that's an interesting point. What do you make of the fact that while Peugeot is closing a factory, Toyota is opening one in this country?
Well, you're looking at a brand new factory in comparison to an existing factory, so the productivity in a brand new factory will always be better. But the comparison between PSA and Renault is an important one, because PSA does almost 45% of their production in France, and Renault only does 23%. So it's not more than half. It's 3/4 of their production is outside France. And then if you look at the size of the vehicles that both companies produce, compared, for instance, to the brands you mentioned in Germany, they are in the upmarket segment where you can make money, and in the small vehicle segment, and that's the most of the market in France, it's very difficult to make a profit. Peugeot did not make a profit in France. They are burning through 200 million euros a year at the moment. So if it's going on that rate, then the capital may be big, but it's not big enough to survive.
And is Peugeot losing money because it made poor strategic decisions, or just because, and we can call up those numbers, they speak for themselves. New car sales in France down 14% in the first half of this year. Barry Van Gestel, which is it?
To me, it's the market. The market went down. They call it a tsunami. But the point is that not only the number of the vehicles sold have gone down, also the average price of a vehicle sold has gone down drastically. If you sell a vehicle like a 508 or you sell a 208, that's a big difference, both in the production coverage, but also in the return on the money that you have invested. And nowadays, they are all the 208s and the small vehicles. Volkswagen again, or Mercedes or BMW, selling probably vehicles on average twice the price of what Peugeot is selling. But that doesn't mean that the production cost is also twice as high.
But the production cost is one issue, and the market is another one. There is a market, and as I've understood the case, Peugeot will produce the same amount of cars. They just want to produce them elsewhere. And so the question is the cost of labor, because their argument is to say that labor is too expensive in France. We reply to that, what is expensive is the price of shareholders. And if you make a different allocation of resources of profit between wages or shareholders, then you have a solution to the situation. But what is, I think, interesting in this case is that Peugeot still, even if they produce cars elsewhere, will sell them in France. Their expectations is to re-import those cars in France to a local consumption. So there is a local consumption. It's certainly going down, which is something, environmentally wise, not so bad, and that should be understood not only by the industry, but as a whole of a societal situation and evolution in France. But is it acceptable that we lay off thousands and thousands of people to make cars elsewhere and then bring back at a high environmental cost those cars back to France?
I think we should put facts also. I mean, there has been some government support for years in this industry. Whether you had the premium, whether you had loans to the industry, all kind of subsidies. This industry has been highly subsidized for years, and the issue of restructuring has been postponed. So I don't think the issue is only dividends or not dividends. The issue is that this had to take place at some stage. We knew that the market was artificial in that and virtual because of subsidies.
Mark Dean, are the French any worse than any other of the big nations when it comes to subsidizing the auto industry?
Well, I mean, I think that the more general issue is French competitiveness, and you know, Peugeot's problem, in fact, is that it's shut out of the main world markets that are growing. It's shut out of China. Shut out is a strong word, but it hasn't, you know, reaped the gains that Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes are getting in the emerging markets. And you know, when we talk about labor costs, it's not just about the cost for the French market, but it's about the ability to have a product that sells and is affordable abroad. And if only selling cars in France and only selling cars in Europe even is not going to do the trick for any company in any sector today.
So, and getting back to the point that Raquel Garrido made, is there a dividends pressure that's weighing in on this? That the pressure to pay out a dividend means outsourcing?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think there's pressure there, but you could argue that that's the pressure from labor costs as well. You know, I mean, the point is we just can't, you know, isolate ourselves in France and say, you know, there's not we have to remember there's a world market there, and we have to compete. And if, you know, we're not going to do it, you know, other countries will, whether it be Germany, Italy, China, or anyone else.
But the pressure by dividends is a problem for international competitivity also. Not only, we often talk about labor costs being an issue for that competitivity, but my point is that also the fact the pressure put by dividends is a problem.
I mean, you know, the profit margins of companies in France are lower than they are in Germany, in the US, in China. You know, they're also, you know, and if profit margins are lower, payouts to shareholders are lower. So, you know, I don't think that's not really where the key problem is.
They're still too high.
The share price of Peugeot is at its lowest ever, you know. So talking about dividends now, when you see that the price of Peugeot is €7, I mean, I don't think that the issue is now whether there's going to be more dividends or not. The issue is competitiveness and key profitability.
In any case, in a car, the cost of labor in those cars is only 15%.
By the way, Stéphane Cosset, I just want to show you what the leader of Raquel Garrido's party tweeted a little earlier, Jean-Luc Mélenchon. He said, "Don't forget that the Peugeot family is the richest of all French families exiled in Switzerland." True. When it comes to France and its captains of industry, they have a relationship with public opinion, which is perhaps not the same in other countries.
Well, that's true, and that's part of the issue. There's a cultural issue, and this is never the culprit is never the government, is never the public opinion, never the French. It's always the companies, and as long as we continue to say so, well, we're going to continue in that path. And look at yesterday. Yesterday, Jean-Marc Ayrault delivered a speech about... The Prime Minister delivered a speech about the social pact or whatever he called it. He never mentioned at any time company, the word company. Actually, the head of MEDEF...
the Business Leaders Association.
The Business Leaders Association had to say, well, you did not mention once the name of company. Can you believe it? You're talking about issue of competitiveness. You're talking about growth. And you're not at any time mentioning the idea of profitability, of competitiveness, and the idea of having company companies resuming profitability.
Barry Van Gestel, what's your specialty is the car industry. What's your look in at capitalism à la française when you listen to this discussion?
Well, I think that's absolutely not the issue. The issue is you can sell a vehicle, take it to 08 or something like that. You can sell it for 7,000 or 8,000 euros. If that vehicle is to be produced in France, 800 euros more expensive than it is to be produced outside France, that's 10% on the sales price, but it's 20 to 25% on the production cost. So you have to be competitive in the market, because if you're not, and competitive is not decided in France. Competitiveness is decided in the world market. Remember, 2 of the biggest car producers in the world went bankrupt 2 years ago. And the country had to put in $100 billion to get them back on their wheels again.
You're talking about General Motors?
General Motors and Chrysler.
There is an underlying severe problem when we talk about international competition in the car industry, is the environmental consequences of that shifting of the transport of the cars from one place in the world to the other. So it makes sense to shrink the harmful market.
So there should be a carbon tax on the cars that move around.
On the extra
hold on,
mileage.
Let me just ask Barry Van Gestel about this point. When you see that it was the U.S. government that bailed out General Motors and Chrysler, is that any different from the way things are handled in this country?
It has a different name, but it's basically the same.
But the state intervening in this issue is fine, and it should intervene more, actually, because what you need here is a really core transition in production to make it environmentally sustainable. So you need to be thinking about what are we going to do? What are going to be tomorrow's means of transportation, etc. So the state has to intervene. There is a market. There are needs, certainly, and there's a worker know-how in France. So,
and it's the government that has to run that discussion.
Well, if the workers have a say, if the state has a say, then you can find solutions that answer not only to the question of profitability. I mean, if you look at ArcelorMittal, for instance.
We'll pick up on that point when we come back, because we're going to have to take a quick break. But we will be back. You're watching the France 24 debate.